Thanks very much to Councillor Andy Foster. Sigurd Magnusson is our next guest in this discussion on what's happening at the local level. Wellington Region EV Working Group Convenor. He has had 20 years' experience in the software sector and is co-founder and director of a leading New Zealand software company, Silverstripe, and he also compiles a regular comprehensive guide to New Zealand electric cars. Sigurd, welcome.
Great, and thanks, Andy. That was really good broad context, because I guess I'm just diving into the less evil of the evil of cars now. So I've got less time than it takes to charge a Nissan Leaf at Kawakawa, just to go through a few different bits and pieces. And I sort of just got a little bit of a snapshot about regions in terms of their charging and their fleet adoption. So later on tonight, you'll be able to see a little documentary about Northland. So I won't go into that too much, other than to say, look, they've really led the way. So wherever Joseph Camuso is, he's one of the leaders there. And the Lions Company and the council, with support from ChargeNet, also have put in quite a large number of fast chargers and slow chargers. And so that's one of the regions in New Zealand that you can drive around the region really easily. There was historically some talk about a renewables highway that never really got off the ground, and so in its place we've now got ChargeNet, which is a private initiative, which is utterly fantastic. We now have a nationwide rollout so that we can drive both Teslas and Nissan Leafs and everything in between around the country. So we've got a couple of tens of those coming in, and I'm always forever hounding Steve about when other ones are going in, and he always assures me that Otaki and Featherston are not too far away. So that's going to be really, really great. Auckland, through Vector, are putting in a number of chargers as well, generally in partnership with other places like malls. And there are a number of initiatives that are, I guess you could say, hatching. Most of those are supported by councils and Lions companies. Now, you'll be forgiven to think that you can really go anywhere and charge anywhere on that map. I think we heard a little bit about that map earlier, but just to point out that the majority of those green spots are campgrounds. I'm guilty of putting a few of those there. They're basically a bit of a stopgap. So a lot of those nodes there are not purpose-built for EVs, and so we do have some ways to go. And the sorts of issues that we have, but and I can appreciate this, having owned an electric vehicle for nearly a year now, is it is still very difficult to get between cities. It is difficult to get around the region, say into the Wairarapa and back, and so you have to be quite smart and plan a lot ahead. And so that will present a scaling limitation, and so we need to make that really, really easy. Another issue I see here is fragmentation. So one of the things that was mentioned by Chelsea is that firstly you look at coverage, but there are other issues. And so right now I can use a little dongle to charge with a fast charger, but I don't want to have 8 of these. And perhaps I could cope with that. But then again, coming back to a scaling issue, it will limit uptake if every fleet manager and everyone else also has to deal with that. So we need these things to operate much like ATMs, where I can take my FPOS card and put it into any ATM and still get $20 out. So we need that interoperability. And we've talked about putting electric vehicles charging stations into high-profile locations, and that's really important. Yes, we do have a couple in Wellington, but largely they are invisible. Most New Zealanders do not know where an electric vehicle charging station is. So in terms of driving ahead, I did a little bit of per capita math here, and so Auckland has more than half of the raw number of electric vehicles in the country. They also currently are shooting ahead to have the highest per capita. A few different regions have about 3 EVs per 10,000 people, and places like Westport, unless the Excel files have been given, have none. And you'll see a correlation between those and where charging stations are going and populations and all the rest of it. One of the interesting things, I had sort of reverse engineered Minister Bridges' report, and basically we need the whole country to be on an average of 5 this year, so Auckland's already there. I looked at Dave Carley's and other numbers from Christina Boo, and we're not terribly far behind British Columbia with a similar population, but Norway's zoomed ahead in ludicrous mode. Chelsea made a point earlier about how you have to do this as an emotional thing, and I utterly agree. The best thing to be selling an electric vehicle is not me or anyone else in this room, it's the car itself, and I'll show you a little bit about this in the future. So you really need to let the car do the talking. You also need to I guess, let electric vehicle owners talk. Yes, there's a massive role for ECA and others to do an authoritative message out there, but electric vehicle owners are very passionate. They probably know the products better than the dealers do, and it makes it for a very, very accessible dynamic. And we talked a little bit about range anxiety today. So probably the best example of EV owners talking about range anxiety is to say, well, look, to hell of it, we'll just drive electric vehicles from Cape Reinga down to Bluff. You can't actually drive further than that in the country. And so there we are at the very bottom of the country. That was in April. So moving on to a completely different topic, myself and Martin Barry have performed a couple of surveys in recent months, and it shows that a couple of the councils are putting and have put charging stations onto public land. Now, this is just that they are on public land. So, for example, some of them might be through ChargeNet or other initiatives. But that does mean that they are in a accessible and potentially high-profile location. So there is a lot of value in there. And, here's one, for example, outside of the Douse, which, again, comes back to that point about you're doing something for yourself, but then your car can be charging during that process. The fleets are a different thing, and I haven't finalised all the figures, so I've sort of made the numbers a bit fuzzier just because we're not quite prepared to share them yet. But there are thousands of vehicles in local government, that's excluding DHBs and a few other areas. But the interesting point is only about 20 that are electric or plug-in hybrid. Interestingly, in terms of buying intentions for the next 12 months, there's really only about the same number as well. So when I kind of got these results back, it made me realise that perhaps it was part of the wrong stage of the game. Perhaps it's more about going back to the fleet managers and getting them socialised with the vehicles, getting them in the driving seat, and then after maybe another 6 months, and they're all really super excited and they're raving and they're loving it, then we could ask about how many that they are actually looking at buying. There's one mayor who has an electric vehicle. It's Ray Wallace out in the Hutt City. And I did pose a question about whether there were intentions following the local body elections, but it came back to that earlier point that people weren't really sure about it. So the data was really going back to being suggested to say, look, we need to have this education campaign. So there is, as Chris pointed out earlier, a regional EV working group made up of the 9 councils in the area. Across that region, if you do include the DHBs, there are over 1,000 cars. And at this stage, we're really just sharing knowledge, swapping numbers, those types of things. We're also having a conversation around charging infrastructure. We're at debate what type of socket to put out at the Douse. But we're also looking at a strategic view. We're saying, okay, well, if we were to put 100 charging stations around Wellington, the region, so Otaki, Marsden South, what would that look like? Who would be involved? That type of thing. So it's a very, very early stage of the process. So really all I'm doing is flagging that if you have ideas or support or views on it, well then come talk to us, because we would love to work and kind of figure that one out. But clearly there are different scenarios where it's a destination or whether it's putting it into a high-profile location, such as supermarkets. To deal with the overnight challenge to don't have off-street parking. I used to have a house that was up about 50 steps, which is a typical scenario in Wellington. Parking buildings and enabling journeys and all the rest of it. So I'll finish off by just talking about the Greater Wellington vehicle policy. So you almost have to just keep this quiet in a way, because I haven't quite got around to the emails to staff yet, I'm afraid, Chris. But it has been agreed last week, and within the corporate, transport accounts for 40% of the emissions. So there's over 100 vehicles, and it's a significant issue for us. And what we've adopted now is an electric first policy, which kind of just makes sense. But basically, when a vehicle is being purchased, the first candidate has to be an electric. You have to look at that. If that isn't fit for purpose for some reason, for example, you need to tow 500 kilos worth of stuff on a trailer and you can't do that with a Nissan Leaf, say, then you can look at a plug-in hybrid. And then if both of those are not suitable, well, then you can look at a fuel vehicle. Now, a non-plug-in hybrid is still classified in that third tier. So you'd still have to justify that with a checklist and take that upstairs for sign-off. We've also made more restrictive fuel economies, but the real issue that we have is that many of our vehicles in the fleet go swimming, and there's no electric vehicle that can do that at present. And when there is, well, then we can lower the economy emission standards for that type of vehicle. We've also dropped the preference that was previously in the policy around diesel. We've enabled people to say, well, look, if they have a fuel vehicle and they want it to go electric, that can be proposed. That doesn't mean it'll necessarily be approved, but it does mean that they don't have to wait until the vehicle gets over, say, 100,000 k's mileage. And clearly we'll need to put some charging stations in around the offices. I don't want to leave us, but you can see this and I can share this stuff. But basically the main thing we had to look at was making sure that this was economic sense. So we had to look at things like bringing in leafs that we use, making use of AOG pricing for the Outlander. And I guess I just want to point out that, you know, say if you look at the far left two columns, a Nissan Leaf, despite its much higher upfront cost, is still cheaper than a Toyota Corolla. And interestingly for us, it was a finding for me for sure, was that a Mitsubishi Outlander is more emissions beneficial to drive, say, to Masterton than a best-in-class fuel vehicle being a Toyota Prius. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. So I'll leave it with that. But ultimately, if other fleets adopt the same type of policy and then that works its way through for the next, say, 5 years, then primary school kids like these won't know anything other than EVs to buy when they go to. Thank you.